Welcome to Carrying Stones and Digging Holes to Cultivate Consciousness, where, for the next 2 hours, Bridgette Lynn Dolgoff and Kelsey Sweet will be sharing their knowledge and understanding with their own beautifully unique twists on all topics related to helping humanity to achieve betterment of health in body and in mind. Settle yourselves down on this fine Saturday evening. For now, it is time for Bridgette and Kelsey.
All right, everybody out there in Revolution Radio Land. Hey, so we got all kinds of ways to donate. It's really important to keep alternative radio, First Amendment non-corporatized radio going, and freedom of speech and ideas, thoughts, philosophies, politics, whatever you may be into. We've got a host for all your needs for everybody. We've got opinions for everybody, and we've got information for everybody. So lots of ways you can donate. freedomslips.com. We've got several donation areas. You can go to the end of the page. We've got snail mail, send a check, money order. We also have Zazzle.com where you can pick up a mug, a shirt, support your favorite host, and support the network at the same time. And we also have card. You can do an ATM or a credit card donation. And let's see, Patreon. And you can make, whatever kind of monthly member donation that you would like to on Patreon that helps us and our little bills and our little coffers. So just so you know, nobody at Revolution Radio makes any money. All the money that goes into the kitty pays for servers and whatever else that we may need. And everybody here, including the management, volunteers their time 100%. So please donate because we're bare bones and we could use that money to keep Revolution Radio going solid, in the years to come, for new people to come on and do shows. So that's pretty exciting. Also, you can go to freedomslips.com. You can go down to schedule Studio B. That's where Kelsey and I are now. We both used to be in Studio A having our own show, but we're in Studio B now, and you can go down to 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. You'll see a little thumbnail picture there. Click on that, and we've got a back page. So we've got lots of information about myself, about Kelsey, links, contact information. So if you feel that you really got to shoot us an email, go right ahead. Or if you want to schedule an appointment for the numerous things that we do, classes or whatever else, we would be grateful to get your message. Okay. All right. So let's see. Where's Kelsey?
Hi. We're navigating snacks with the little one and getting settled in for radio.
Awesome. Well, how's your week been?
It's been all right. Just trucking along, I guess. I've got on the background set up, like cast through the TV, like a background image of a moving fire in a cabin and the snow falling. I'm in a peaceful place at the moment. How's your week?
Great. Well, as you know, I am in Timbuktu. I wasn't sure if I, I brought my tablet to, try to get on, if I couldn't get my computer on, but they do have DSL in a little hut where I'm staying.
Well, very good. How was your trip? It was long. You were driving for 12 hours.
Yeah, and it's really difficult to travel with people who are in a hurry and so the ride up was a little bit rough. And so, the area is really beautiful. It's in a place called the Fruitful Valley. And it's really interesting because a lot of the people here, they all have like a minimum of 10. Not everybody has a small parcel, but small parcels are like 10 acres. And it's interesting because like one of the neighbors just, 3 doors down grows the hay for pretty much all the animals that are in this little area. So it's kind of neat to see how, they're all prepping and they all are making things that go well with each other. So it's kind of a neat to watch people prep and people in, we're like 80 miles from like a big town. And then 40, like 40 miles from a gas station.
You'll be walking, huh?
Yeah. So, yeah, it's been nice. It's been a little cold and icy up here in the Pacific Northwest in Washington State, but the food's great. They follow more of a, like a vegetarian, like Indian diet from India, more, like Southern India. So the food's super great. The spices. I had a pear chutney today that literally I almost fought somebody for the rest of the trip. They're like, does anybody want any more? And there was 2 of us and we're like growling at each other. I'll lick it. Just give me that. But yeah, so
amazing.
Yeah, so there's like people here have raw milk, have some beautiful cows. They've birthed them all. The man cows here on the property have all been born here. And some of them are huge. I guess we would call them bulls. But they are all trained to actually work, to actually be able to put on, oxen gear and, plow fields and things like that. So even though they're giant, really giant, they just love people and they work, they take them to some of the other people's areas when, fields need to be plowed or, certain things need to be done when, a big tractor isn't advisable kind of a thing. So lots of milk and organic, raw milk, which has been really nice. And the people here make homemade yogurt. And I usually don't eat a lot of dairy because I'm lactose intolerant to public dairy. Like it makes me just violently ill anymore.
It's so processed.
So I've been actually eating a lot of the raw stuff. Jen had a nice little bowl of yogurt. She was so excited. And then, and they make cheese. The cheese is just fantastic. So all this stuff homemade, and then, fermented cabbage, and, sauerkraut and fermented veggies and just, all the spices and everything. It's pretty good. The food is really, really awesome. So so it's beautiful land and the neighborhood and everything else, and watching how they work together. And they also had a huge garden area they have 4 medium size greenhouses. And so it's been good once we've gotten here and we've kind of gotten settled in. And it's been nice to sleep. And we got woke up at the crack of dawn by the cows, because the little hut that I'm staying in, it's like an 8x8 little house. And and so the cows were moving because they're right next to us. They're 9 acres. So there's like 10 cows in the morning going, So we had a symphony of mooing this morning. That was our alarm clock, which was great.
I mean, it fits right in with our introduction. Start your day and bring nature right in.
Yeah, so it's been good, and I think just to get out of Reno a little bit, and
you're there for a couple days, right? Until Monday.
Yeah. So it's for me it's sometimes I'm aware of a lot of preppers that are prepping stuff but don't have actual land, so they're like stockpiling food and a lot of that kind of stuff. So I haven't really been anywhere where like the whole community, they're all aware, they're all armed. If there was any kind of conflict, literally all these people would start running off their properties out of their house, right, to defend like the whole area.
Well,
And
we see
just,
that in some more of the more rural areas. I mean, they're a lot more defensive and action oriented, I suppose.
well, they're a lot more conscious too because they
Yes.
pay attention to, who's coming down the road, why are they here, what's going on, like should they be here? They'll call each other. And just, how I love this one guy who has big property and he grows all the hay for all the horses and everybody in the neighborhood. I mean, each individual pays them, but the great part about it, it's much cheaper and it's local. So they can just go down the road and get what they need every week. And then they can pay that person money. But then there's not this transportation and gas money that's included on it, which, makes the product more expensive. So everybody here. Yeah.
On the social level too, when you're building the community and building the system within, you're building a much stronger infrastructure too, because everybody's interconnected in a lot of other ways as well.
Yeah, and the thing is like it's so much better than having canned food or dried food or whatever else, beans and rice, stored where you go into people's garages here, and they have like a 2-car garage and it's like stacked full of jars. It's all stuff that they canned and jarred fresh from the summer, like everything you could imagine. And yeah, so it's good to see, like all that fresh food, and it's really good. Sometimes when you're in the city a lot, like in Reno, we don't really, unless the farmers market's open and you have growers from California coming in where you can buy, farm produce, you don't really get this kind of quality food. So, the taste and the flavor and everything is just, so much better.
I agree. I'm jealous. I like good food.
Me too. I'm like a food whack job. I'm a farming food whack job. I'm also a seed nut and a soil compost weirdo.
makes for the best meals.
It does. So anyway, the people are interested in, maybe having me, because it's a live, it's, an in-person interview, and a friend of mine that knows these people drove me up here, and he's in from India visiting everybody. He's white, but he moved to India for spiritual reasons later on in his life to fulfill his, I guess, his spiritual mission. So, so it's kind of like an on-the-spot kind of an interview, and interview with Jen too. And it looks like pretty much, if I want to come back here, like on a long term, like they're really interested having me come. Because I just know a lot, I'm biodynamically trained. I've been on lots of different farms. I've built a lot of urban farming, like I know a lot.
You've been wanting to get on a farm for a while now too. It's one step closer to manifesting your own.
Yeah, well, yeah, I've got a big 20-year project, that I'm going to build totally at some point. But yeah, and the cool thing is I was greeted by all these herbs, when we came in the gate. There's like lemon balm and big rosemary bush, and yeah, so it was nice to see some plants that I like working with and stuff like that. So it's yeah, we'll just have to see how it goes and how I feel about it. And I think in the past, because I've been in kind of survival mode for quite a few years, I probably would have like jumped at it right away. But I just want to kind of feel. I'm kind of working on this process of I want to feel things out more. Like how do I feel? How does this make me feel? How does the sunlight, hitting that mountain over there feel? How do the cows feel to me? How does Jen feel, in the environment, so that I can get kind of a feeling perspective instead of like a mental perspective and or physical perspective, but more kind of a feeling perspective. So it'll be nice to go back home on Monday and ruminate it, chew on it a little bit, and then see where I stand with it all, and then go from there. So that's kind of like
neat opportunity.
Yeah. But the other thing too is like I've had a lot of opportunities like this in the past, but what happens is that sometimes I'll jump on it and I'll move, and then it turns into like kind of a nightmare. And because, usually turns out that people that have land need me more than I need them. And so there's not a lot of the truth or the facts or the underlying current, is readily available. It's hidden. And so when you move, everything relaxes, and then you realize like, what you're getting involved in wasn't what was disclosed. And that's happened before. And then it's taken me like, 3 or 4 months to try to get myself out of the situation or off the land. So, this time I'm going to just kind of feel things out just a little bit more. But the interesting thing is the people here are anti-vax. They're anti-GMO. I mean, a lot of the things that are super important to me is really important to them. And I can tell by all their food, how they store their food, what's in the containers, how they eat, and kind of, how they live their life. So that's been a quality thing to be able to check out.
One thing you've said to me before is that, like, within this world and within this reality, we live in a very apathetic kind of existence. So it makes a lot of sense to slow down and to take your time with it, and to feel.
Yeah, this is a lethargic world.
A lethargic world, yes.
And it takes a lot of time and energy, to get things done. And then if they do get done, sometimes they're left hanging for long periods of time, but it is a very slow, lethargic world. And, the thing is, I think, at this point in my life, I tried to run through the front part of my life, like too much education and, too much of this, and throwing myself at, the wall all the time, or trying to outrun things and outsmart them, and spend a lot of time like trying to figure out solutions to problems in the future that haven't even come yet. And I think now, just with, the political climate and everything that's going on, I think it's just really important for me to really kind of slow down, and then just be able to be aware, like with everything going on around me, and, really taking care to be kind of more in the present moment with everything. And not, I think, the other thing too is not worry. I mean, we should be the period where we should be like overly worrying, but I have to keep telling myself, like, I've spent so many years worrying and planning and trying to get done and accomplish, and that I just really, I just need to be in a place where it is what it is. And that's, my last teacher, Bobido, used to say to me all the time, it is what it is, and it's going to be what it's going to be, and you can't control it. But what you can do is when it shows up, then you have the opportunity to deal with it, because now it's in front of you. But
and dealing with it from an in the moment space too, instead of from the past fears or future anxieties. It's very helpful.
Yeah, because, he said you can't change it. It's always going to be what it's going to be. The only place that you can meet it is when it's time for you, to deal with it directly. But up until that point, you just kind of have to let it go because you don't really have any control over, what's going on around you.
In dialectic behavior therapy, we call that radical acceptance.
Yeah, well, it's radical acceptance is a good thing.
It's helpful, and I think when you can get to that point where you just accept radically, no matter what, that's the way it is, it's helpful to be able to move beyond it or to take different perspectives or find the humor in it. It can be challenging, but the words we use and the way we use those words are very important in shaping the neural connections within the brain, correct?
Yeah. Well, another thing too is I think, we have to think about languaging too, because acceptance doesn't mean I gave up.
Nope.
And surrender doesn't mean that I gave up.
No.
It just means that whatever it is that I may be putting on the back burner, or maybe something that I was in denial with that, I have to confront, or I have to further understand, or, accept.
Well, when
So
people can't accept something, then that's when things start going kind of crazy. If they can't accept something for the way that they are, and then they try to change it or control it or manipulate it, or they freak out over it or have emotional reactions to it, and you can't get anywhere.
Yeah, today we were having a discussion here with the lady who lives here, because the people that pretty much are living on the land are, quite a bit older than me, and I'll be 52 in December, but I'm like the spring chicken. But they I was talking to the head lady here, and we were talking about how there people are believers that don't believe, because we were talking about a situation about somebody presenting themselves as this, as like a spiritual, they follow kind of and I don't want to put this out there in like a weird way, but they follow Hare Krishna, right? They're Krishna devotees. So they had a guru who lived in the United States till the 70s who wrote all these books. And was a really amazing guy, actually. He had like 3 PhDs and then studied all the Vedas, and he kind of had his own like spiritual take on stuff, but it was very grounded, and he saw in the future, how people were going to really need to live in communities. And so most of the information that he tried to write before he died in the 70s was about how people need to build communities and how the interaction of communities kind of needs to be. Because they realized like not everybody that's going to come on these communities are going to have the same belief systems, like not all of them are going to be Hare Krishna. You might have a few of these and a few of those, and how to get along and how to interact and work, for like the common purpose. And it's not Hare Krishna like, weird stuff that we see in the media, with people jingling bells and, getting really kind of Americanized, I guess, extreme Hare Krishna people. They're not like that at all. So they do have practices that they follow, and but it's not like way over the top. And so they try to be really conscious and really pay attention to like what the world is mirroring onto them. So we were talking about somebody who has been involved in this movement for a long time and actually knows like the text and everything, out of his, right off the tip of his tongue, but he doesn't really practice this stuff, and they're recognizing this. And I said to her, didn't you ever hear that statement, the believer who doesn't believe? And she was like, wow. And I said, yeah, I think so many people who think that they're conscious, have learned enough information to fool a lot of people, and haven't really taken it internal, like radical acceptance, haven't really internalized it. And my teacher, who was the Lakota Sioux medicine woman that I studied with for a year, she was from an old, and I can't really say her name, but she was from a very old family lineage, a very important one that was gifted medicine from a spirit being that came, here. But one of the things that she said back when I was 23 years old was that there's three, kinds of people. There's the atheist, and she said we should really praise the atheists because they are the backbone of our society, and our society would not run without them. They're the ones that work 20 or 30 years without complaint to do a job, that's necessary to produce something so we can live the way that we do. And they don't believe in God, and they don't believe in reincarnation. They believe like this is it, and, they do our best. And then she said then the second group are the ones that she said are the dangerous ones, the ones that are the ones that we have to really pay attention to, because whether they're conscious of what they're doing or they're unconscious of what they're doing, they're extremely dangerous. And they're the ones that are the believers that don't believe. And so they are the ones that have learned enough languaging about whatever they're involved with spiritually or politically or whatever else to use that vocabulary to where you think that the person is really conscious. But they're really not, because they haven't really done the work. And it's more of a con job. And not so much that they're trying to do it. I mean, in some cases they are consciously aware of it. But most of them are doing it to try to fit in. And they haven't actually done the work.
Fad. There's a lot of fad and trendy words, so it's really easy to play in and dress the way that you can, or to assimilate the cultures in a way.
Religion is the worst. I mean, no matter whether it's Catholic or Christian or shamanism or, Hare Krishna or Hinduism or Taoism, you have all these people that dab into it just enough that'll have language, but they haven't really actually taken they don't believe what they're saying, I think they want to, but what happens is become dangerous because they become like con people. And so because they haven't done their work, and then you get involved with them because they're using the right vocabulary, then what happens is that it's a dangerous situation. It's only a matter of time before it blows up, and then you're kind of involved in it as well. And then she said there's the third person who, has been the atheist, who has been the person that knows enough, that can, spit it out whenever necessary. But then you have the third category, which has taken it to heart, right? Radical acceptance, surrendering, who walks the talk and talks the walk. But the walk has to come first, right? You have to walk the walk the first before you can talk the walk. So it's interesting, that we still have to, monitor our lives and the people that are in our lives and what kind of, languaging that they're using. And just, to know kind of and that, I think that's where kind of living in the present moment. And for the first time, on a farm interview, coming and because most of the time if you are going to go move to a farm or you're going to go work on a farm, there's always, smart people. There's always a physical interview. They want you on site just to see. Permaculture stays and permaculture internships are so like that, the good ones, because you have to go and do either a 4-day or a 2-week work stay. And so they get to see what your ethic is, right? If you work, if you have a work ethic, do you sleep in? Are you sick? I remember this one permaculture stay I did. It was on the Bullock, Boca or Orca Island. And they're, world famous for permaculture, the Bullock brothers. And they were picking new interns. And so a lot of us had to go up there and we had to do a stay. I think it was like 10 days or something. I was there camping out in a tent. It was really wet. It was kind of rough, actually. And one of the guys that came immediately, the first day we were there that everybody had to get up and start working, he pretended like he was really sick, and he literally didn't get out of bed for 3 days of the 10-day work thing. And then when he did, then he really didn't really do much work. He just kind of like meandered around, and it was interesting to me, but it was smart on the part of this permaculture, to like test drive people just to see, what's going to happen. And go on, like how you're going to work with people.
When the synergy lines up and you can fill out the energies, that's always helpful. You can see how the groups interplay. Or I've always been fascinated by how like blood types and personality types all intermingle and mix in as well. On top of having to have the knowledge and the physical capacities to do the work too. There's a lot of different dynamics that go into culture building and community building. And then to make something that's conscious is even more challenging.
Yeah, well, one of the hardest parts is diet. I mean, that's so many communities that I've lived in and places that I've gone, like you have to, assimilate the diet. And so if you go to like, this would be a vegetarian place, right? So no meat at all. Dairy, vegetables, and things like that. So no meat, no fish, no eggs, because the people that, their beliefs set the pace. One place that I went to when I was on this urban farm in Mendocino, Noya Harbor area that I was on, we ate a lot of spicy food. So we did eat meat. We slaughtered our own animals. Lamb, we slaughtered turkeys, chickens. I did fryers. That was part of my program when I was there, 100 fryers. And then Muskogee duck. What else do we have? Chickens. And we made our own breakfast sausages, and we had eggs, and we had CSA and vegetables and all kinds of stuff. But the farmer was really into spicy food. So the kimchi he would make, or the fermented vegetable stuff that he would make, were pretty spicy. And then he would use heat on the meat, like in the breakfast sausages and stuff when we would make them. And that was like the worst diet, because when I got there, it was a little bit toxic. And then all the food was like really, really clean. And then it was also spicy. And then all this probiotic, this fermented sauerkraut and fermented kimchi and all this other stuff. But I was explosive. Like nobody wanted to work next to me for like about 3 weeks, and I was dying. My gut with all the spices and the probiotic stuff. Like I was just, every day I was a ticking time bomb running for the bathroom, like several times a day. And just the gas and everything else, and sweating. I just would start breaking out into sweat with all the probiotics and the spice. It was just, it was wild. So that was like, every time you go on to a farm, there's this integration period where, you get a little sick right before you get better, because the food is like a lot cleaner, and you're moving all around a lot more. So your lymphatics are draining, you're sweating, you're outside breathing, cleaner air. The food, usually there's always probiotic food on any farm that you go on. So yeah, sometimes the diet is like the roughest change. Lived in an ashram.
Too, like in how in like the gardens, like how the food adapts to the body system. So it would make sense for like a full-on garden system that's community oriented with a series of like human bodies. Like your body would have to adapt to what the plants are putting out in order to ingest it. So like that synergistic relationship.
Yeah. No, that's exactly it.
Yeah.
And probably
you got to get in line with the food.
Yeah, the hardest diet that was just way, way hard, and I had kind of a emotional. I didn't really do really well. I was living in this like Sikh Kundalini ashram setting, and it was just rough all the way around. It was hard, and you get up at 3:00 in the morning, take a cold shower, and then you're seated for practice from like 4 a.m. to 8 a.m. And usually there's like 2 hours of Kundalini yoga, And then there's like 2 hours of meditation. And so you're exhausted by the time 8 o'clock rolls around. And then you have to, then the food comes out. And so there was this very strict way of dealing with the food. But there was absolutely no dairy of any kind, no eggs, no meat, no cheese. And so, if I have good meat, I'm going to eat good meat, right? But so I went into that experience and I literally felt like I was starving to death because I was so exhausted, having to wake up and when I'm in REM, and then the stress on my body was just so hard. Like I just went through these really intense, like emotional roller coasters. And, it was so extreme that people would be like, where have you been today? I can smell meat on you. It's like, you couldn't even like go to a restaurant where they served meat, and sat and had a salad, with your friend.
Getting smelled out by the group.
Yeah. And so it was just really intense. I mean, like no butter, no nothing. And then it was just, the whole thing was just a really intense experience. And then was this hierarchy. And if you were on the low end, I mean, people would like snag your toothbrushes, they would rummage through your stuff, and kind of take, like whatever they wanted, because you're living in this open, you don't really have rooms or locking doors. So you're living in this very open floor plan, right? Where everything's kind of, you try not to co-mix your stuff, but your stuff gets co-mixed. And so on top of it, you don't have your toothbrush anymore because somebody snagged it, because everybody's poor, living in the ashram because you're committed to, this experience. So then there's, like different kinds of work and stuff like that. But that had to be like, living in that kind of an ashram setting probably was, the diet like literally almost killed me. I was just so unprepared for feeling like I was starving to death. And so that's why those people get really, really thin, is because, they're doing like pretty hard practices and then a lot of work, at the ashram, and then they're eating like a full vegan diet that, you're not getting really enough calories or fat from the diet. So yeah.
The Kundalini practice, like I know they incorporate a lot of like cleanses and things like that, and juicing and fast as well. So there's a lot of
not in ashrams, because in ashrams you're eating a vegan diet, right? And all the stuff's gone. So there really is no fasting. So let's call it modernized Kundalini yoga, in cities is kind of like where you'd find that platform of cleanses and stuff like that. When you're living in an ashram, that stuff doesn't go on because it doesn't need to, because your diet's already too clean. So yeah. Yeah, and then coffee, there's so many things that, you can't have. Good thing about this property is that the head guy, the older guy, he likes cowboy coffee, which is like right up. He likes really nice French roast, and he likes it strong. And that's exactly how my coffee goes down. So that was, that was a good check. Because I'm not sure I could live, farming in a community where I couldn't have a nice cup of hot coffee in the morning, especially in the wintertime when it's cold and then you've got to go out and you've got a lot of work going on. Tea.
Diet's quite a practice, and getting to know your body in it as well. It can be very challenging.
Yeah, there's, I've got a line in the sand, and there's most of it, I'll deal with, but there's just a few things that I just, have to have. It's my directive. It's only so far I'll go anymore. And the other thing too is like, being 52, like I just don't really have a need to be, tough and have like crazy extreme, food stuff going on. And the other thing too, like one of the things that it really helped me with living in that ashram was that a lot of the people who had been practicing a lot of this stuff for a long time had you could smell the ammonia, coming from their bodies. And so some of them had bouts of kidney failure. And then a lot of them had some serious problems with their kidneys because, everything happens to you when you go into REM. So your gallbladder is going to dump, your liver is going to dump, your body's going to clean itself. So if you're waking up at 3:30 in the morning, right in the middle of your REM, your body every day after day, and then you're putting it through this, intense 4 hours of stress, and you got this diet stress on top of it. Your body is just not going to be able to manage that kind of thing for long enough. And so I started kind of learning about, like, for example, yoga, like mainstream yoga, that people do. I was talking to different people, and they said that was actually originated for young boys. So the way that this person explained it to me was that the regular yoga, like that women and everything get into here in the U.S., would be more like a military practice for young boys. So it was never actually it wasn't really ever actually designed for women, right? But it's amazing what happens, and then you have these really, strict diets that go along with it. And so later on, I started really recognizing this in my practice, and I'd have people coming in that needed to be fixed because they have a lot of pain, they needed some osteopathic work or whatever else. And then I'd realize, I'd work on them, and then they wouldn't hold, or they would have, something happen. And then I started to realize, like, well, these people are doing too much yoga or dancing, and have these crazy extreme diets, to stay thin, aren't eating enough, fats, and so their brain isn't working. And so what you start to see is the crazy, and especially in women, you start to see some of these people are practicing yoga, super thin and muscular, especially women, that they're a little bit crazy, right? They have a little bit of instability. And you start to realize it's because of the restrictions, in the diet, and that the brain is actually not getting enough fat, there isn't enough, and then their bodies are having, high inflammation reactions, to everything that's going on. And I was talking to a doctor a couple months ago who was a cardiologist, and he said that, when this whole keto diet struck, it was great because his patients were, like losing weight that he'd been asking them to lose for a long time, getting in better health. And then they started staying on the keto diet because they couldn't maintain being really thin without the keto. And the keto is not meant for you to be on it very long, right? It's a very short-term thing. And so a whole bunch of patients started dying because of the keto diet. Because it causes the heart to become irregular and the heart to become extremely stressed out. So it's a really good diet in the beginning, to like jumpstart your metabolism and stuff like that. But people stay on it like 2 years. And he said another thing that was astonishing about it, people had been on it for a while. Not only did they have, irregular heartbeat, they had little mini strokes. And then he also said that it came with like a whole host of weird emotional stuff. Like people had panic attacks and all kinds of, and also, had a whole bunch of other stuff. And it's interesting, like, what we push in America in the mainstream, like dietary wise, like how extreme people go to these lengths to be something they're not, or to do something that's so extreme instead of just living a good lifestyle, right? Getting proper exercise, even walking, and eating, like a more balanced diet, and that the extremity of it all, and then how it void your body of nutrition. And I mean, the other thing too is I think that people, I think we've talked about this before, but I mean, the regular diet that people eat is mostly fast food or white bread or refined sugar or processed foods. And, those refined foods don't have nutrition in them. They've actually been so stripped of them that when you eat them, your body actually, in order to digest these products, has to strip your body of nutrient. So it has to strip your tissues. It has to strip your cartilage, your tendons, your bones, to be able to get the nutrient so that the body can digest products. Like why it's not good to drink distilled water, because it has the same effect. It starts to strip your body of nutrient in order to get through your system. And so if people just ate like a basic healthy diet. So in the Edwardian times, what happened was there were a lot of people who were on the high echelon that, were crazy. They used to think, and some of it was genetic inbreeding, like kings and queens and, royalty, and then Edwardian period where, just hierarchy. But a lot of it actually was nutritional, because what happened is that the echelon, the higher up people, they liked the softer white bread, right? They liked it more refined grain. And so what would happen is that the shaft of the grain that has a lot of the nutrient, B vitamins and all kinds of stuff, B vitamins are kind of linked with mental illness. You don't get enough of them. You kind of go, off the radar. And so the people below that were cooking all the meals and getting the grain out and slaughtering all the animals and feeding, the upper part of the castle and the people who lived in the higher up, they would keep the part of the grain, and they would make their bread from it. So they were actually eating, the most nutritionally dense part of the actual grain, and the bread was like a lot coarser. I mean, if you make bread from really good like ground grain, it's pretty intense bread. I mean, you could like probably kill somebody with a loaf, right? Because it's pretty hard and pretty intense, but it has all the nutrient in it. So as the refined bread, you start to see, because bread was a staple, you start to see lunacy, because you start to really see mental illness come out to play. So, nowadays they look at like diet, and they see that, a lot of the lunacy or, the weird behavioral problems of some of these, kings, queens, and elite people, probably were very much that they had the depleted part of the food, because that's the way that they liked it. And then like when corn, and, they've been doing this to our food supply for a long time. There was a period, I think it was like I think it's like somewhere between the 1920s and the 1940s. And I can't remember the name of the people started getting these open wounds and sores, especially kids. And especially in the South, where they wouldn't have eaten a lot of wheat or bread. They would have ate a lot of corn, right? They would have ate a lot of corn cakes and cornbread, and a lot of their food was derived from corn. Well, what they found, they had this like epidemic and they thought it was like some kind of pandemic, because people kept showing up in the hospital and they had all these open wounds and sores, and most of the people were poor. And then thank God there was a doctor that actually went out and started looking at the situation and started evaluating. And what they found is they changed the milling stones. And so what was happening is that the milling stones were actually taking off the nutritional part of the corn grain and giving them the refined powder. So everybody would take their corn to their local miller, and then the miller would grind it, and then they would take their flour, their corn flour, back home. And what they found was that they changed out all the millstones, and so these millstones actually grinded off as shaft to give them higher quality powder flour, but also took off the nutrient. And so all these people started having nutritional deficiencies, which were these sores, these open sores, and a lot of children had them. Any comment?
Well, I'm thinking a lot about like chronic illness or people who have chronic diseases, and how even though they have like strict adherence to specific diets, they still struggle a lot with the body, and then just how much more in balance that relationship with the food has to be. Or it just seems like it's so easy to throw things out of whack, and then trying to pull in lost nutrients through like vitamins and minerals can be really tricky, just with the quality and the whatnot that we find in the stores and what's available too. So then there's like all the toxicity that comes through from taking too many things or mixing things together, and then like the addition of medications on top of that, and how that screws around with the body, and then like trying to recover from that. It just kind of boggles my mind, because like in the healing process, they say so much of it is the consciousness, or you started talking about beliefs and belief systems. And so I think when it comes to like the healing of the body and like blessing of the food and incorporating that into it as well, it's helpful, even if you don't have low quality food, to believe that you're going to get some of the most nutritional value out of it. Or like, I just think it's funny how the mind can play in with the body and the uptake of nutrients as well.
Yeah. Well, another thing too is like, so we used to be, I had this client, and we'll talk about him in a minute, but back, we're like in Buddha times, we just ate as we went. I mean, yeah, were we cultivating some crops? Yeah, we were cultivating some crops, but there was food everywhere, right? Because there's forests and food and herbs and plants, and, people could just go, hey, I'm going to travel from this town to the next town and not have to pack anything. Maybe take, like a little bread, right? But because they could eat these different plants along the way, right? Fruits, plants. I mean, you go into a forest. I mean, even now, I was so blown away last summer when I did my wildcrafting herbal medicine program, and we were out in nature. Like 60% of what's out there is edible, but you can't, rule of thumb is you can only eat, the amount of the palm of your hand, right? So if you're going to eat in the forest, that means that you've got to find like 10 or 15 different things in the course of the day that you can eat, about, each serving being about the palm size of your hand, because anything that's even non-toxic can become toxic, right? For example, there's a lot of herbal medicines now that you can't give people because they have problems with their liver, or they have problems with their gallbladder, or they don't have a gallbladder anymore because of, their diet. So sometimes the herbal medicine will be a little, say, harsh on your liver. But, if you're in a healthy state and you're living on the land and you don't have problems with your liver, then you can probably take that medicine to overcome what you need to, because, it's not going to overly, hurt your liver. But because most people have ill-functioning livers and gallbladders, or don't have a gallbladder, there's some herbal medicines that you just can't give people, right? Because they're on the edge of their liver not being good. So you give them that herbal medicine, it's going to push them over into the opposite side. So it's almost like our society has become so unhealthy that you can't even use herbal medicine in a lot of the cases, which means that they don't have an option. They have to go to medical, right? They don't, and it's hard when I get those people, because you've already done the damage and you've already destroyed yourself to a point where, if I give you something, it actually may be a little bit harmful. And so, I have to be responsible, and I can't really do harm. So my job is to do no harm. I had a client that was from Nibia. He was a Nibian priest. He, had, this is when I was down in San Diego. I was living in the ashram, and then I worked on Saturdays out of one of the oldest metaphysical stores in the United States called the Controversial Bookstore down in San Diego. And Saturday was my day. So I had people come in, and then, I would look at their health and advise them, and, just lots of different stuff. And so I had this one guy that heard about me who was a Nibian priest, which, this guy's, as far as consciousness, this guy is like way high up on the echelon, because he has like 10 doctorates, a lot of them in a lot of different kinds of religions and spiritualities. Oh, hey, we're at a break.
Blood.
Anyway, I'm kind of tired, so I was kind of rambling, but all right, so donate. freedomslips.com, and you can go down to Studio B, scroll down to our slot, 8 p.m. Eastern, click on the picture, back page, all kinds of information about Kelsey and myself. Yeah, if you feel like you need a little appointment, see people in person and online. Kelsey sees people in person and online. Just, shoot us a mail, and we'll get back to you if you have any interest in some of the work that we do. And then also, while you're there, please look at the donation. We have Zazzle.com. Buy something from your favorite host. Donate snail mail. We also have card donation. Hit the donation button. You can leave your card, a little money. Patreon-y. You can leave as much as you want monthly. You choose. So all those different ways that you can support us. Everything that we do here is 100% volunteer. And so nobody gets paid. All the money goes to what we need it to go to keep us rolling. So please, please, please donate. Keep us alive. Keep us alive.
Free speech ain't free.
Yeah, free speech ain't free. Yeah, it's hard to be non-corporatized these days and stay afloat, because they're constantly trying to starve you out. So anyway, so I'll finish my story, and then if you want to talk for a while, you can too, since I'm kind of tired and rambling. But anyway, so I had this Nibian priest who came to see me. He was like in his 60s, super conscious. Like, this guy had doctorates, studied all kinds of world religions, and he had gotten himself to the point where, in a good way, he didn't sleep anymore. At night, he spent it sitting up and meditating. So he heard about me, and when I was in San Diego, and so he came down to see me and have an appointment. And I was surprised when, by spiritual text, that he had, achieved everything, but he had cancer. He had severe prostate cancer that he didn't want to be medically treated for. And it was a whole education process, because we live in a totally different society, and we can't really do those kinds of things to our body. I mean, even Buddha, there's a statue of Buddha that was whittled by somebody who saw him under the Bodhi tree when he was eating one piece of rice a day and totally emaciated. It's in a museum. And even Buddha decided, screw that. Starvation is just not the path to enlightenment at all. And so a lot of these, suffering techniques. So I had to explain to him, totally re-educate him that, and this is when it really started dawning on me that a lot of the spiritual pursuits from ancient times force people into some of these situations, but we don't have the support systems we do. We don't have food growing everywhere. We're not eating the right kind of food. We're living in environments that have too much EMFs in them, Wi-Fi, also smog, pollution, living in environments that are not conducive to these, high, harsh spiritual lifestyles. So I had to...
Everything is genetically modified, too.
Yeah. So I had to, teach him that he couldn't not sleep anymore, and that he actually had to start feeding himself. You know what I mean? He had to really actually start feeding himself. So I found a raw milk farmer down there in San Diego. So he was going over there and getting milk, and then we got him kefir grains, and I started showing him how to make kefirs and different kinds of stuff. And that he had to reprogram himself to start sleeping. And at first he was kind of resistant to a lot of this kind of stuff. But I said, you've reached these high spiritual levels where you don't really need sleep anymore, but your body needs sleep. So do you want to be in this world, or do you not want to be in this world? Because you kind of need your body. You need to take care of the pet, your body's like a pet. And you need to take care of it in order to stay in this world. And I said, so you have to make a decision. We got in a huge fight over this about the third time that he came to see me. And then he realized how damaging really the things that he was doing to his body. And so no wonder his body was responding with this really severe prostate cancer. And he had been working on visas to get his wife here, from Africa. So, he had to, stay alive, and he wanted her to come here and be with him. And they'd been working on it for 10 years. So I said, what do you want? What do you want to do? Keep reaching those spiritual levels and telling your body that you don't need it. Running past this world, not participating in this world, or do you want to participate in this world and take care of your body and be here? So he had to actually retrain himself out of all this really highly spiritual development that he had achieved in order to heal himself. And he did. He actually rapidly healed himself when he started sleeping. And then he said to me, he said, I really missed sleep. And one of the things he really liked was kefir, because in his country, they eat a type of milk thing that's like a kefir. And he said, it really reminded him of childhood. He really missed it. And so he was eating a lot of things, and he actually brought joy back to his life to actually eat a lot of things because of his spiritual stuff. He was minimizing, what he ate, what he was in contact with, and really kind of evolving himself out of the need of having a body, and having to choose, do you want to be here or you do not want to be here? And so, I started realizing early on, when in my 30s in my career as an osteopathic nutritionalist, person, that a lot of these spiritual ideas, when they become Americanized, are extremely dangerous, extremely hazardous, and are not really that healthy.
I really see a lot of unhealthy practices kind of across the board, or just the desire to push it and to take things too far. And I think we've talked about this before at some point or another. It feels kind of deja vu when it comes to that mind-body-spirit balance. And I find that one of the trickiest things as somebody who is doing research into the conscious aspects, or into self-healing and what makes self-healing happen and what makes it possible. It's tricky because I feel like a lot of people in that mode to heal or to want to accelerate healing want to take these very kind of bizarre pathways or just getting like through the blocks, the mind, body, spirit blocks. I see it a lot in like, we've been talking a lot about spirit, but I see it a lot in like body practices, or just in my own body this last week. I'm trying to go to the gym one day a week in the midst of like my monthly cycle, like almost floored me. But just like the intensity of trying to push the body beyond its limits, and then getting into like the emotional connection in it all of like, why do we push ourselves to these extremes, or why do we make ourselves have to suffer in order to feel good things? And we get caught in this cycle of permission, I think, too. I find that a lot with my clients, or like the people that I work with or sit in sessions with, is they often don't have the permission to want to feel good, or to want to be healthy, or to put self-care first, because our language has distorted that relationship with health and wellness and the body. So we have this very, I think, detached relationship to the self. Like, we don't really know who we are as a whole. Like, what does it really even mean to be conscious? What is consciousness? Like, we don't even know like who we are, like in all these different aspects. And we start diving into healing the body in all these different levels, and then we're questioned by so many different things. And I think it just cycles back around to beliefs. Like, what is it that we really believe? And I wonder what your thoughts on this are too, of like how the belief system of the collective conscious like allows these sort of things to happen, because there's like the certain realms of thoughts or ideologies that suggest that like through meditation or through our mind like powers and wills, we can tap into the light source and the energies and the resources around us, and not have to eat and not have to sleep and not have to do these things. But then like, not everybody believes that. Some people believe that, but not everybody believes that. And so there's like these limiting factors when we're channeling energies. And I think like the co-creative collective like the universal aspects that unite. I don't know. Like, I wonder if like globalization is going to help like belief systems, or like if there's just overall like systemic influences that are trying to distort belief systems through various religions and through different languages. And health is tricky. Health is really, really tricky.
I think there's a lot of distortion, but I think that, I love always what the Hopis say, when the war inside ends, the war outside of us will end. And so I think sometimes like what we're seeing outside of ourselves has a lot to do with our inner distortion, because there's a lot of like outer distortion. Another thing about food is, there's no way that I would have liked to not have eaten that pear chutney today. I mean, it was the most yummy thing I have eaten in so long.
Oh, I've been craving Indian food too.
To give up, to be a breatharian, to solely breathe in the chemtrail air. That's it. It just isn't going to work for me. But the other thing too is like where breatharian comes from, which most people don't know, because this is the other problem. There's this disconnection with the study or information or research, but there is sound proof, and the Thunderbolt Project, a whole bunch of scientists that are, re-looking at really how this world was kind of created. And there's actually a theory that at really old point in time on the Earth's surface that we actually had some kind of ice layer, glassy type layer that was over the planet, whether you think it's flat or you think it's circle or whatever, and that everything on the planet was like a greenhouse inside, and there was tons of pollen everywhere. So you literally, and there is some scientific data to prove, not from America. This is stuff that I've read from, other researchers from other countries. But there is a lot of data to support that the lungs are digesters also, so that they could have intake in pollen, and we wouldn't have needed so much actually food to eat through our stomach. So I think this is kind of like more of the ancient system of breatharian, that there would have been so much pollen from everything in the air, because it would have been like more of a greenhouse, and there just would have been pollen floating around, like cottonwood, like when it releases its seeds. So pollen in the air like that you would have breathed in, and your lungs would have been able to digest it, as a food source for the body. And there is some data that goes along with that whole thought process. But the thing is that that's not what we have now, right? So to base all of your information on being a breatharian now is like completely different. And our lungs are probably a lot different, because, our lungs would have had to adapt to environments where, there really isn't a lot of pollen in the air, right? There really isn't anything really good in the air for the lungs to like digest, which means that you're going to have to take in certain types of nutrient, in order to keep the lungs healthy. And one of the things I was reading recently was on iodine, and that iodine plays a lot of roles in the body, really important roles. And people don't get enough iodine. You think about like people in Japan who, up until Fukushima, lived to 125 years old. These are like some of the oldest people in the world. And there's two big things that they get in their diet a lot. One is a calcium, an ocean type calcium. So 20 years ago, there was this huge run on coral calcium, which depleted a lot of coral reefs, in the world, because everybody had to have it, because, it's the longevity. But the other one is iodine, and these people would eat, up to 3,000 units a day of iodine, where, we get like no iodine, and the only iodine that we get is iodine that they put into our table salt. That's why they iodinized table salt. Because otherwise we would be completely beyond depleted of iodine, where the oldest people that live in the world are getting 3,000 units, we're getting like none. And so they were saying like how important the role that iodine even plays in with your lungs. It's like a super important part of your lung structure too, and that you can have more lung problems if you don't have the iodine. So the thing is, like, we can't really get everything that we need through the air anymore, because we're not living in that kind of a, we're not living in a giant, greenhouse on Earth anymore. It's turning into massive desert. Yeah, it's dying. So
basket of chemicals in the air.
Yeah. So, I mean, the thing is that, I've been studying nutrition for so long, it just kind of blows my mind about, how much people just don't know. And the other thing that really irks the holy poo-poo-poo caca out of me and makes me want to, like, go to people's houses and beat them up with baseball bats is, you have this huge run on doctors who were all heavy drug prescribers, right? This is how why people became doctors, why I even had known a few naturopaths that got into being able to write scripts, and they made tons of money. They didn't even work as a naturopath anymore. They were writing scripts for pain meds for people and getting like a huge kickback. So they were getting all these people addicted. They were pharmaceutical addicts. So now, doctors can't legally, and, our president wrote a lot of these executive orders turning, doctors who prescribe these kinds of medications into drug dealers. So whether you're a drug dealer and you kill someone with heroin, or you're you're a medical doctor and you end up killing somebody, you're going to have to take responsibility for that. You're a dealer, and you're a drug dealer, and if you kill somebody, you need to be, held liable for that. So now, because also a lot of the pharmacies, even if the doctor writes the scripts, the pharmacy will deny. So say, for example, you come in with 2 scripts for pain meds, the pharmacist is going to deny one of the scripts because they can't give you 2 types of, pain medication. If you do, that's like all this major stuff has to be done, to qualify it. You can't just give people all that kind of stuff anymore. So now you have these doctors who have never studied any kind of nutrition at all, right? That wasn't their game. That's not what they're involved in. And so now you have them writing books on longevity and nutrition, which it's probably somebody else's work that they stole, or somebody that they know. And the other thing too is they're formulating all of these nutritional supplements. And the part that really irks me out, being kind of a farmer, nutritionalist, and also having been in the medical field, outside of the medical field, is that the only true nutrient that there is that everything works together in a relationship. And you see this with plants growing outside. Like, if you grow herbs together with other plants, they're much more powerful and they're much more happier. But if you grow them in a monoculture, then they're going to be downgraded completely because they don't have a relationship with other beings, and so that they lose this, energy or relationships with the other. And so food is like that. You need to eat food in combinations because your body breaks it down in a way where it can synthesize the exact nutrients. I think nutrients we're like a computer, and it's more like data. It's like data and information that's being processed into our systems. And so if we're not eating the actual food and we're taking a lot of supplements, we're probably missing something that goes with something, and it's not identical because, and a lot of these supplement people get into this stuff. They're like, it's biological nutrient. Well, it's not, because it's in a capsule form and it's in a jar. So it can't be, there's no possible way that it could be biological, because biological compatible to my body is the plant, the milk coming right from the cow booby, that herb, that's right there, that's going into my mouth right now that I'm going to chew on. That's biological, right? It's living, right? It has a biology of its own that is having a relationship with my living biology, right? Biological. So there's no way that a supplement or any of that kind of stuff is biological, right? There's just no possible way. And so it blows me away. And, you have all these people that are formulating their own, there's like 10 different kinds of magnesiums on the market. There's some that are super toxic that the body shouldn't even take. You'll get diarrhea because it's poison. And there's a lot of vitamin C out there where you take over 1,500 units and you have diarrhea. Because guess what? It's poison. Because it's not biological and it's not even close. It's like some man-made, toxic crap that they're selling you. So I think the only way that, we can really heal as human beings and have health and fix the environment, fix the water, fix the air, and everything on top of it is wherever we live, restoring the soil, planting plants that are edible, trees that are edible, herbs that are edible, creating, relationships of plants together, and growing our own food, because that's what's going to help the environment heal. So and I'll let you talk, but Paul Stamets, I remember about 4 years ago, I was listening to a lecture he gave on YouTube. He's the mushroom guy. I mean, this guy is like, super brilliant about mushrooms and what mushrooms are capable of doing, fungi. He's really mind-blowing. So he gave a lecture about that, I guess from space, they can now see mushroom spores like sporing out like from the planet, right? And he was saying, think about that for a minute, because mushrooms eat everything. Mushrooms love nuclear radioactivity, right? They will eat that and turn it into something positive. They love, heavy metals like the chemtrails. They'll eat that stuff all day and then they'll turn it into something positive, something like sugars and other wonderful things that can go through them and into the ground and feed other plants. Now, mycelium can also be dangerous. If you have a huge amount of it on your land, and then you have a massive drought, then the mycelium the mushrooms will try to stay alive, and they'll actually bleed your trees of the water, right? So they can be a little bit, in bad conditions, it's going to save itself, right? So it's going to live like a really long time, outlive probably everything, which, in the end might be like a really good thing. But he was just saying, like, we have, this alien thing, this mycelium and these mushrooms on this planet. And in 1 billion years, maybe some of those spores will leave and they'll go into the atmosphere and they'll travel around and maybe hitchhike on comets and asteroids. And so in 1 billion years, maybe those mushroom spores will end up on another planet. And in another 1 billion years, those mushrooms will re-terraform that planet, heal it, digest the bad stuff, and then re-terraform it, into something like living.
Mushrooms are cool.
Yeah, so I think a lot about, we are such short-term people. I think because our lifespans are so short that we don't have like this long thinking process of 1 billion years down the road. And my Native friends are always talking about, paying it forward for the next 7 generations. And I don't know, it was about 4 years ago, I was talking to one of my Native friends, and she's so funny. She said, so how long do you think one of our generations, like if we talk about the 7 generations, how long do you think that is? And I'm like, I don't know. I said, I know Native people in the recent years that lived to 200 years old. Like, I have a friend, I know somebody who's a chief who's like 80, who his father lived to be 200 years old. I said, so, I know that, there's those kind of genetics on the planet. So I said, maybe a couple 100 years. So you've got 7 generations times 2. And she said, no, it's, I forget what she said, 500 years or something like that. So it comes out to be like 7 generations forward would be 3,500 years. So what are we doing right now that is going to help this world 3,500 years from now? And that's like, taking all of these supplements in plastic jars. So we have more, and this the other thing too is like, so we have more stuff to throw away. If you live on the land, you don't need garbage. You don't need anything, right? You don't need anything that you're going to have to throw away. If you're living sustainably and you're living off your land, you have everything you need, and everything you need is reusable and sustainable, like even your mason jars that you can your food. Guess what? Reusable. So you don't get caught up in buying all this plastic and all this stuff that has to be thrown away, because plastic creates estrogen. Did you know that plastic is the number one thing that is eradicating the male chromosome from the planet, is turning the planet into pretty much 100% feminine.
Plastic, huh?
Because it produces estrogen in the body, the BPA. So whenever you're using plastic and stuff, like plastic ware or drinking out of plastic, and the plastic leaches because it's petrochemical, right? Number one, all plastic is petrochemical. Everything we wear has stretch in it, elastic, our shoes are plastic, all of it, everything's plastic. So petrochemical, even our mattress on our bed foam is petrochemical. It's why it smells so bad. Sometimes when you buy a new mattress, it stinks like hell because it's chemical, it's oil. And the other thing too is when that oil comes out of the ground to produce those plastics, they don't refine it. So all the heavy metals and toxins are actually in it. So that plastic bottle and all that other stuff that you're drinking your water in or your soda or whatever else, and then it starts to break down as soon as it's manufactured. So it starts to off-gas immediately. There are some studies that are linked to that sudden infant death has nothing to do, that babies just die. But there are direct links to mattresses because babies get so hot and they're laying on a petrochemical mattress and the heat is helping the mattress to break down the petrochemical and it off gases and babies absorb 95% of what's in their environment. So their bodies are actually breathing in through the nose and through the skin petrochemical poison that kills them. That literally just suffocates them to death.
That's awful.
Yeah. And so, all this plastic. And so what it does is it forces estrogen, our systems, to produce a huge amount of estrogen. So this is why you see all these younger guys, with boobs, heavy, that are kind of playing out female roles. And then you also have, women that are getting baldness, because there's too much estrogen, and women that have all these weird female problems because, they have way too much estrogen in their system. And, you're only supposed to have little periods of high estrogen, right? When your cycle is, coming on. And then it has to shift into like a different hormone, right? Because there's a lot of things going on. So basically, I think it was like about 20 years ago, there were some researchers in Canada that produced a medical paper that talked about how the male chromosome was actually vanishing in humans from the planet. And that they talked about that, they believe that a role of the plastic and other chemicals that are creating a high estrogen-induced chemistry that is taking over men. And there were some studies that were done on frogs in ponds that had a lot of plastic debris, and then, water's corrosive, so it kind of breaks down the plastic into small pieces that you can't see, so frogs would ingest it, fish or whatever else. And they would find that where there was a lot of garbage plastic in these ponds, that it was all female frogs, and they couldn't figure out what was going on. They thought it was some different kind of environmental chemicals, but when they did the study, they realized over time that the female frogs would have the male polywogs, but by the time they developed, they turned into a female because of the estrogen plastic in the waters and everything else. It totally just changed their whole chemical makeup as they developed.
It's kind of a weird metaphorical interpretation of this whole like shift from the masculine into the feminine age, and like going into the Aquarian, or like giving up like patriarchal influences, or just kind of on like an like a correlated like offhand level. Or it's just interesting how it just goes back to, I guess, like the beliefs, or like the having non-judgment in like which is better, the masculine or the feminine, but knowing where the balance is within the whole system. And like it's not just one thing or the other, like it's the whole ecology that plays into the mix. And I really don't think that anything is like outside of our influence. I think, which is why we keep coming back to the collective conscious or the collective focus. But getting everybody on the same page is a little bit challenging. And getting everybody to have a similar belief system that health and wellness and well-being and health consciousness and self-healing is critical to the entire planet, if not anything beyond this as well.
Yeah, I mean, that's why I like
the little mushroom spores going out into space. Like, who knows what's going to happen beyond us.
Well, we live in like this totally, polarity, duality, and I always crack up because people are like, oh, we're the 3D moving to the 4D and the 5D. Are you kidding me?
It's all conceptual. Like, how do you even describe something like that when we have no idea of what consciousness is?
Well, but we live in a duality. It's one side or the other. We live in a polarity, a duality, where we have men and women. We have two parts of the brain. We have the left side, the right side. They operate completely different. We have, we are a polarity. We live in a world that's a polarity, a duality. And the key is to like find the neutral ground, like in between. My native teachers always taught me that, be in the balance of it,
Well, within the light and the dark is
can't,
the spectrum, right?
Yeah, and being somewhere in between, because, there's like a famous thing that goes around from a chief that said, about the wolf. You got the good wolf and the bad wolf. And then it comes down to which one do you feed? And so the thing is, it's better to feed neither, right? That's the key. Because, if the light goes up, then the dark has to go fight it, right? Because that's the duality polarity. If the darkness goes up, then the light has to fight that down. But what if you hold the ground in the middle, in the neutral area, and you just cease the fighting and you bring it all kind of into balance? That's where I think we kind of need to go. And I see this a lot, like I was going to talk about this a little bit because, I'm, not that I'm like a man. Okay. I just want people to know that, like, I'm not like, like a man or anything. So I don't want people to like think that, like, oh, she must be like some, super masculine whack job. But, one of the things, so I'm doing this weekly, it's like 10 months and I really like the class, and I really love the provoking thoughts and things that are coming through to it, so that I'm doing this, living biography, right? Which is day to day checking in, biographies of my past, but who am I? What am I doing? How am I doing it? So working within this, living biography, social art, right? And how my biography affects my future, how my biography was in the past, how it affects my present moment, how it affects my interaction with nature, my dog, other people, the skies, the planet, the cosmos. But one of the things that I finally realized is why I haven't really been able to stay on a full biodynamic farm. And I don't adhere to a lot of the modern day Steiner followers for a lot of reasons. Because I have my own like spiritual path, but I love all the Steiner stuff. And I don't really think Steiner would have liked a lot of maybe the Americanized modern Steiner stuff. I just don't really think that he would have. He was very key at this time, about us being individuals, working towards thinking and freedom. Even a lot of the biodynamic farm work, he talks about creating your own individualized farm, right? And thinking for yourself and, action oriented. And one of the things that I find in a lot of, these kind of communities is that there's this ultra feminized factors. right? So you have a lot of these people who, and I'm trying not to be really harsh and judgmental. I hope none of these people would be interested in anything I have to say, so I don't have to worry about them listening to my radio show. But, and then they have men who don't really fit in or haven't ever fit into society because they're kind of wishy-washy, don't have their own backbone. And they're kind of ultra feminized, not gay, but just on that kind of spectrum. So then there's a tendency of women that get attracted to some of the Steiner stuff that are super frail feminine. So then you have it's weird because you don't really have this really masculine component to get something done. Right? There's like, let's talk about it and, rummage through it and but at the same time, nobody's getting anything done. Nobody's getting out there and milking the cow and getting the field planted because there isn't enough masculine energy to actually get that done. But they want to ruminate. So it was kind of interesting in the class on Thursday because a lot of them are really on the left side. Right. And I've been all kinds of sides, but I'm on more of a conservative side. So the good thing about where I'm at right now for the in-person interview, even though they're Hare Krishna people and stuff, they're conservative, right? They're conservative spiritual people because, there's work that has to be done, right? They have belief systems. They carry guns, right? We went out on the walk to this lake and you got people in Hare Krishna, head wraps, with a farmer coat on and farmer boots on and packing a gun on the side. So not all, a lot of these spiritual people worldwide, they're not like what Americans would turn them into, right? Which is kind of what people would consider them to be more on the left. And they're not, they're more on the conservative end. So in this class, I'm starting to notice and so I'm coming up with that word like ultra feminized because I think to myself, I'm a tough girl and wherever I go, I can outwork most men. So if I did choose to date somebody, I'm going to need a guy who can be take the ropes out of my hand and be like, okay, honey, I'm wearing in a good way. I love you. You don't have to do this by yourself. Let me wear the pants today. Let me go build the wall. Let me take care of these cows, as a team, operating kind of as a team. And a lot of the people in a lot of the biodynamics that I've been in, the men, because they all kind of, even if they farm, they still have this ultra feminized side, I just wouldn't be interested in having a relationship with them because I would feel I have to be the tougher one, which would put me kind of even more in a masculine state, right? And that then they would be like my children that I would have to kind of watch over and take care of. So it's kind of interesting, thinking about this while my class was going on Thursday because, it has this overwhelming emotional drama, ultra feminized thing. And so it's supposed to be a discussion about freedom and love and how that interacts. But it ends up at the end of the class turning into a whole bunch of people who are very lefty, who are emotionally charged about the conservatives because they just don't get it. And there were lots of us that actually had to leave the Zoom room, even the woman who was hosting it, because it got kind of so crazy because they wouldn't label it like we're really mad at the conservatives because they just don't understand. But they would go into these whole things about how angry they are at the conservatives and they just don't know how to communicate with them. And, that conservatives are causing this great division and all this other stuff. And I'm thinking in spirituality, right, in humanity, we have free will. And this is what we're allowed to do to figure out who we are. We get to choose a side. which side works for us. And so they're trying to figure out, talking to each other, how they can come up with certain kinds of language to basically mind control and convert their conservative friends and the people in their life, instead of just loving themselves for who they are and their beliefs, and loving these people in their life for their beliefs, right? And allowing another person to be another person. And it just kind of blows me away that, they were talking about, the division, what's creating the division, and why they don't understand. And it's like, I wanted to say out loud, like, maybe because you're manipulative. I mean, here you're sitting here after class on the Zoom thing, creating more of a division because you think you're right, right? It has nothing to do with, like, you allowing other people to have a process, even though that's what we're talking about. That you people are trying to figure out how to control and manipulate people to be what you want them to be and believe what you want them to believe. Now, that is not consciousness. That's not spirituality. That's not being a human being and allowing other people to have their decisions based on their education or their experience or their choices, and loving them just because, or giving them enough space to be because everybody's trying to figure it out. And so it was like so crunchy, after my class on Thursday, because I'm like, this class is about us trying to figure out what our freedom is, not take a freedom away from somebody else because we don't agree with them. But it's interesting how we manipulate things, like goes back to that radical acceptance. Like, they just can't radically accept that, they may be right and maybe somebody else is right, or maybe they're wrong and they're wrong, the other people are wrong too. But maybe there's like this balance in the middle between the duality and the polarities, that's where they really need to be, right? So, why don't you just focus in on yourself, do your work, and not spend so much time being angry and hostile towards people who don't have your systems of beliefs. Take the high road. And this is the thing. Out of 139 people in the class, I'm pretty sure that I was the only one that was conservative. So I didn't say anything about it. I just listened and nodded my head, in the Zoom class. Just listened and nodded my head because, if I was to open my mouth, I'd have 139 people jump me.
It's all just retaliatory. Well, I feel like in a lot of the arts groups and the alternative things that I fall into, there's a lot of similarity there in just like having more conservative ideologies kind of in the midst of it and not feeling able to speak about those in a lot of different ways, and just watching and listening and holding the space, I suppose, for people to exist and have different belief systems and thoughts. But it can be really challenging when those aren't reciprocated, or when there's like the projections and the judgments that are put out there of what people want you to be or how they want you to fit into this framework, like you're saying, because of control and needing to have other people be the puppets or fit into their lives in predictable ways so they can feel like they can be in control, or that they can understand or know what to do in the instance that something might happen. But if it's unpredictable, or if it's new and it brings up the challenge of that internal belief system, people don't know how to react, and therefore, we have all these unconscious beings walking around trying to get along, trying to build things and do things in life, but at what cost and at the expense of so many others, because they don't understand their actions, or how, like you're saying, how 7 generations out, their decisions and their choices are going to influence everything else.
I think that word predictive, I think that's probably like a pretty good word for what they're experiencing. You know, their life and everything, politics and their world was predictive until, you know, COVID came along, and we have a president that is fighting, you know, fighting to help wake people up, and is continuing to work, and people need something that's more predictive, you know, the same old paradigm and the same old things happening. And I think, you know, like I was talking to a friend of mine, and her partner is Libby, you know, very lefty Libby, and their family. And then hers is very conservative, you know, very Nevada conservative. And, you know, there's just no way that they can meet in the middle and have people over for Thanksgiving dinner. I mean, you know, it's exploding into the holidays. And, you know, the conservatives are like, come over, you know, let's just be together, you know, let's have dinner. And liberals are like, totally want to just come there and try to convert their family and, you know, start fights. And I'm sure there's some conservatives that are probably out there that are doing the same thing. But I think it is boiling down to predictive. Like, we can't predict you anymore. You know, we can't predict your behavior. And that means that you're not loyal to me. And then, you know, like, how does that look? And we just kind of need you to get back, you know, so that we can be safe, you know, have you in our life and be able to predict your behavior and your outcome.
It's not easy to be eccentric.
Yeah. And that's probably, you know, in my life, I don't really have a ton of friends because people can't predict what I'm going to be able to do. And I had somebody use the term, what they say today, something like, oh, you really stand strong for your principles. And it's like, yeah, I'm not going to, you know, if you step over that line, I'm going to let you know. Like, I'm not going to scream at you or punch you in the face, but I'm going to say that's as far as you can push me. And this is why, right? These are kind of like where my boundaries are going to be, because, you know, I'm not going to go willingly into the night because this is the way that you want me to be. You know, I'm not going to conform. And so what happens is that, you know, I don't have a lot of people in my life because I'm not very predictable. And I've even been called, a friend of mine like 10 years ago told another person that I was dangerous. I was like,
I've gotten that one too.
what? I, you know, to this day, I'm still shocked that I'm like, you can set your watch by me. If I tell you I'm going to be there at this time, I'm going to be there. If I tell you I'm going to do something, I'm going to do it. If I go to a farm, I'll probably end up doing most of the work. You know, like if I decide to do something, I put 140 million% into it, right? I drive it. So for me to be dangerous just really shocks me sometimes, you know, like, because I think I would be the most least dangerous person there is. Because I do what I say, like, and say what I do, right?
If put in a threatening situation, I mean, you'll know danger's coming because there will be 1,000 warnings. And then if you keep pushing that button, and then, well, why are you going to run in front of a freight train?
Yeah.
People are so strange. Or it's just the fear that talks. Or I think the diversity in the language. Well, because danger can mean so many things. Dangerous to what? Dangerous to the lack of consciousness. Like, you're putting people in a position where they have to wake up or conform, like make different decisions, or have to be accountable or to check their own belief systems and those boundaries. And so many people don't want to go there. They reach this point where of like superiority or authority, where they don't think that they need to know anymore. They think they've got it all. They think that knowing all is spirituality, and that the more information you take in, just because you read it, like it's like the book smarts kind of a thing, right? Like just because you can synthesize or use the words or act or perform the situation, just because you can act it out doesn't necessarily mean that you know what it means to be that. Like there's a 1,000 actors out there who have been surgeons, but would they really know how to be a real surgeon? Probably not.
Yeah, no, I think that's a super good point. And we're coming into like the last minute of the show, but I think that's a super good point. You go through the, you go through the motion, but are you the motion?
Well, it's easy to be programmed. It's behaviorism. It's predictable. It's ABCs of behavior. There's an antecedent of behavior and a consequence. So just about anybody can go through the filter and then be programmed, but then to wake up into that. I mean, can AI become conscious? I don't know if they can wake up into that. Most people can't even become conscious.
Yeah, no, I'm with you on that. Okay, so we're at the end of the show, unfortunately, because we could probably talk for like 2 more hours about everything, and you guys are probably really glad that we're ending, because,
We've got a good poem for next time, too.
Maybe we have a good poem for next